Councilmember Eddie Smotherman has our prayer and pledge this evening. Mr. Smotherman.
Let us pray. God, thank you for this wonderful day that we've had. Thank you for all the blessings that you've given us in this city of Murfreesboro. We're truly thankful, and we hope for continued blessings. Be with us tonight as we make decisions on the future of Murfreesboro, and we hope that with your guidance we'll make the right decision. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening and welcome to Murfreesboro City Council, August 22nd, 2013. And someone near and dear to us has a birthday tomorrow. Is that correct? Thank you, Mr. Lyons, for fessing up and admitting that you're going to be, what is it?
48.
48. I remember that years and years ago. It was a good year. That was the year after I was born, 48. How about that? So we wish you a happy birthday before we get in here and rant and rave at you for everything else you've done. So thank you and happy birthday tomorrow. And we'll expect you at work early.
Yes, sir.
Yes, good. All right, council members, you have your consent agenda before you. Are there any questions regarding the consent agenda? If not, is there a motion to accept?
Move for approval.
Thank you, Mr. Young.
Second.
Mr. Washington, please call the roll, Ms. Wright.
Mr. Gilly.
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Washington.
Aye.
Mr. Young.
Aye.
Mayor Bragg.
Aye. You also have the minutes of the August 8th, 2013 regular meeting. Any revisions, any additions, corrections to those minutes as they've been presented?
Not Mayor, move for approval. Second.
Thank you, Mr. Gilly. Mr. Young, please call the roll, Ms. Wright.
Mr. Gilly.
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Washington.
Aye.
Mr. Young.
Aye.
Mayor Bragg.
Aye. We'll consider for passage now on second reading an ordinance to rezone an area located along Manson Pike to residential multifamily 16 RM16 district.
So moved. Second.
Mr. Gilly, Mr. Young, please call the roll, Ms. Wright.
Mr. Gilly.
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Washington.
Aye.
Mr. Young.
Aye.
Mayor Bragg.
Aye. At this time, we'll consider for passage on first reading an ordinance amending Chapter 2 Administration, Section 2-10 by adopting a revised procurement code.
Move for passage on first reading.
Second.
Mr. Washington, Mr. Young, please call the roll, Ms. Wright.
Mr. Gilly.
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Washington.
Aye.
Mr. Young.
Aye.
Mayor Bragg.
Aye. At this time, we'll have a special presentation of the first award of accreditation for the Murfreesboro Police Department from the Tennessee Association of Chiefs of Police. Welcome, Chief Chrisman.
Mayor and council members, good evening. It's a pleasure to be with you tonight. We are very proud and honored to have some special friends with us this evening. You may recall, I know we've talked about it on several occasions in these meetings prior to tonight. In the year 2010, the Tennessee Association of Chiefs of Police began the Tennessee Law Enforcement Accreditation Program. That was an effort to provide an accreditation program format for law enforcement agencies throughout the state of Tennessee. They began that with a pilot program of 3 agencies, and at the conclusion of that, opened the program up to all law enforcement agencies throughout the state. Murfreesboro Police was one of the first agencies to participate in that program after the pilot. We had 3 years to review all of our policies and procedures and to bring them current with the set of standards that was set forth in the Tennessee Law Enforcement Accreditation guideline. We completed that process earlier this year, and we're very fortunate to have our on-site assessment done in June of this year by assessors from our association and from other police departments. After that on-site assessment, which included interviews with department employees, the assessment team confirmed that our department was in fact in compliance with all 160 standards, and they recommended to the Board of Directors at our July annual conference that our accreditation request be approved, and it was. I have a couple of special colleagues here with me tonight. Chief Kevin Arnold is here with us from the Smyrna Police Department. He also serves as the 7th District Board of Director for the Tennessee Chiefs of Police, and our Executive Director, Maggie Duncan, is here. Would you all both come forward, please? They're here tonight, Mayor, to make a presentation for you. I have some very special members here tonight as well that were a part of our accreditation team, and I'd like to ask them to step forward. Major Anita Flagg, if you would step forward. Sergeant Kyle Evans, who is our accreditation manager, and Sergeant Evans has worked tirelessly to help us assemble all of this product and prepare it for review. And Officer Amy Dean is here with us. Amy, would you step up as well? Not only did we have to create and make sure that our standards were in compliance with the accreditation guidelines, but there were also a number of proofs that had to be created that demonstrated that we were in compliance with those standards. And Sergeant Evans and Officer Dean have worked tirelessly to assist with that process. Our City Attorney, Susan McGannon, and Kelly Baker, who is unable to be with us tonight, poured over hundreds of pages of general orders as we prepared for this. And so a special thank you to Ms. McGannon and Kelly, who is unable to be with us tonight. And I don't think Major Lester made it in. Major Lester actually began this program before he retired, and we invited him to come join us tonight, but I believe he was otherwise engaged. Also, Assistant Chief Fields is sitting over at the side, and Deputy Chief Bowen is at the back here. They played big roles in the assembly and review of all of this material. So with that, Chief Arnold, I will yield the podium to you, sir.
Mayor, Council, citizens of Murfreesboro, thank you all for allowing me to be here tonight. Tonight we come to honor a group of public servants that have achieved something that is outstanding. This is a distinction among law enforcement agencies that the Murfreesboro Police Department has reached, and for the simple matter that submitting to the TBI crime data is over 600 law enforcement agencies within the state of Tennessee. And out of this 600, only 21 have achieved this distinction, with Murfreesboro being the 22nd. Of that is just a fantastic milestone for this department. As a law enforcement officer from another agency, let me reassure the mayor and the city council that the reputation of the Murfreesboro Police Department is one of progression, one of professionalism, and that is known throughout the state. And to the citizens of Murfreesboro, let me say this on good old Channel 3 here. You need to be proud of your police department, and you need to brag on these people, because I'm going to tell you, this is a lot of hard work, and even more better, this is a good steward of the city taxpayer money to achieve this accreditation process. To Chief Crispin, to the command staff of the Murfreesboro Police Department, to Major Anita Flagg, Sergeant Kyle Evans, Officer Amy Dean, you have my utmost appreciation for the hard work that you've done. And at the same time and moment, you have my prayers for the hard work that's coming your way to keep this accreditation. To the officers, dispatchers, and civilian staff of the Murfreesboro Police Department, I want to say this. First and foremost, this honor could not have been accomplished without the hard work of these people that work for the city of Murfreesboro. Just as our code of ethics states among law enforcement, I know that most or 99.9% of all the people within this police department adhere to the code of ethics and believe that they have dedicated themselves before God to a chosen profession. Because of their hard work and dedication, and because of their commitment to the city of Murfreesboro, I'm just honored to be among those people tonight. The Tennessee Law Enforcement Accreditation Program is a voluntary program for any law enforcement agency within the state of Tennessee. The program concept began in 2009 and was implemented in June of 2010 through the Tennessee Association of Chiefs of Police Professional Standards Committee. The state accreditation program is not in competition with CALEA. CALEA is a totally separate entity and item out there. This is just strictly another way for agencies to achieve accreditation. The program consists of over 150 standards that this department had to meet. They had to provide proof of policies and documentations, and that not only proof of documentation and policies, but show that they're being followed. It takes commitment, dedication, and hard work from the agency head, agency personnel, and city leaders to meet the standards prescribed by this program. The time commitment is involved as much as 3 years for some departments, and sometimes, such as my department, longer than 3 years. The benefits of accreditation are numerous. It's just better management and direction to the personnel, to the rank and file. It's fair and non-discriminatory personnel practices, and probably even more important, reduced insurance costs, which could be as close as up to $100 per officer. And the standards of excellence have been met through the accreditation process, and they should be looked upon with great respect. As a member of the Tennessee Association of Chiefs of Police, I'm very proud to be here tonight. I'm very proud of the Murfreesboro Police Department. And with that being said, I now present their accreditation to Mayor Tommy Bragg.
Thank you, Chief. Folks, come on over here and get in our picture with us. How about that? We want to see all of you. Well, don't go too far now. Come on.
Is this in your job description?
Come on. Here we go. Be excited. Here we go.
All right, kids, turn around and smile.
All right, stand still.
I didn't exactly put any makeup on my head tonight.
Here comes
so.
Frank.
Yeah, thank you.
In a hurry. You're going to get put out of a job. That's right.
Wait, I need your head to move a little bit over so we can see Mr. Fields.
There we go.
Excellent. Fantastic.
All right, Chief, we're very pleased, and on behalf of our city council and certainly our residents and your mayor, we really appreciate the professionalism. We respect and honor you all, and we thank you for your service to our city, to our residents, those that come to visit us, and to our business owners. And Chief Arnold, to have you come from Smyrna tonight is quite a feat and honor for us, and we thank you for doing that. We know you've got lots of things to do in Smyrna, and we respect you and love your town, as it is a great neighbor, and we're happy and pleased to be so close to you at all times.
Thank you, sir.
Thank
It's
you
an
for
honor.
being here.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
My
Thanks
pleasure.
very much. Chief? Thank you all, and I'm sure you've heard the expression, you're free to go or free to stay. So we appreciate you being here, and thank you. It's quite an honor for our department and well-deserved. We thank you. All right, council members, any comments regarding that, or we'll get on with our business tonight?
If they're going to stay, I guess they've got the right to remain silent.
That's right. All right, at this time, pursuant to a resolution adopted by the City Council on July the 25th, 2013, we'll conduct a public hearing to consider a proposed amendment to rezone approximately 8.5 acres located along South Molloy Lane from mobile home RMO district to heavy industrial HI district. Murfreesboro's electric department is the applicant. Notice of the said public hearing was published in the August 4th issue of a local newspaper. Welcome, Mr. Adelite.
Thank you, Mayor Bragg, members of the council. During its regular meeting on July the 10th, the Planning Commission conducted a public hearing to consider the rezone of the property that you just described. It consists of 2 tracts, including 8.5 acres on the west side of South Molloy Lane. That would be the property that's colored orange on the map on the television screen before us. The Planning Commission conducted a public hearing, and after the public hearing, the Planning Commission at that night, consisting of 5 members, all voted in favor of the amendment. The property is surrounded by industrially zoned land, and it was felt that the ability and desirability to develop it with a mobile home park no longer existed, and that it would be a better use to be zoned to industrial as it is the property around it. One of the concerns that staff has is the inadequacy of South Molloy Lane. Today, myself and Mr. Richardson met with our city manager to discuss a study that we'll be bringing in the future to the council to study transportation and land use in that area and what can be done to improve the roads and to develop a strategy for its ultimate improvements. So that'll be something that's independent of this rezoning, but I thought I'd give you a heads up to expect something probably in the not very distant future for ultimate improvements to that road. As I said, the Planning Commission, all members present voting in favor of this, recommend approval. I'll be glad to answer your questions.
Any questions for Mr. Adelot before I open the public hearing? See, Mr. Steve Sachs is here, the Executive Director and Head Honcho at Murfreesboro Electric Department. I appreciate you being here, Mr. Sachs. Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Adelot before I open the public hearing? If not, I'll open the public hearing at this time. Anyone wishing to speak for or against, please step forward to the microphone and give us your name and address.
Mayor and Council, I appreciate the opportunity to speak for you. In front of you. I'm Steve Sachs, the General Manager of Murfreesboro Electric, and it's an exciting time for me to be here to talk about a piece of property that we've been thinking about and dreaming about since I began in 2006.
And your address. Got to have your address.
And my address is 5239 St. Ives Drive in Murfreesboro, Tennessee. We are substantially in the same facility that we've been in for over 50 years. Since that time, our population in Murfreesboro has tripled. Our customer base has tripled, and we just frankly are out of room. We need to build a new warehouse facility. We need to consolidate all of our material into one place. We need to have our engineering operations facility all in one place, and this tract of land will give us the opportunity to do that. We also are going to build a operations center, emergency operations center. We've been dreaming and planning this for years, and we now have an opportunity to do that. As Mr. Adelot said, we have not had any opposition in this effort, so we encourage the City Council to move forward and grant us this rezoning. Thank you very much for your time, and I'd like to add my congratulations to the police chief in this award. We all sleep a lot better having him at the helm of our police department, and my congratulations to the city for this.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak for or against? Anyone else? Last chance. I'll close the public hearing at this time, and we will consider for passage on first reading an ordinance to rezone an area located along South Molloy Lane to heavy industrial HI district.
Mayor, this is a perfect location for the future of the Murfreesboro Electric Department. So with that, I'll move for approval. Second.
All right. A motion and second. Mr. Young, Mr. Washington, please call the roll.
Mr. Gilly.
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Washington.
Aye.
Mr. Young.
Aye.
Mayor Bragg.
Aye. At this time, pursuant to a resolution adopted by City Council on July 25, 2013, we'll conduct a public hearing to consider a proposed amendment to rezone approximately 1.13 acres located along East Main Street from residential multifamily 12, RM12 district, to highway commercial CH district, and approximately 0.63 acres located along Arnett Street from planned commercial PCD district to highway commercial CH district. Mr. Matt Taylor on behalf of Special Kids Incorporated and Mr. Milton Cranford are the applicants. Notice of the said public hearing was published in the August 4th, 2013 issue of the local newspaper. Welcome. Ms. Ely has gotten married, and I've forgotten your name.
Okay.
What? Green. Well, I should have known that. All right, Ms. Green, please proceed.
Thank you, Mayor and council members. Our second public hearing this evening is to consider a zoning change request for properties located south of East Main Street. The illustration that I provided you shows an area shaded orange, and it's identified as an area that's in the process of being rezoned to CH. That orange parcel, which is directly on the corner of Arnett Street and East Main Street, was reviewed a little over a month ago by you through an application made by Special Kids to change the zoning from RM12 to CH so that Special Kids could acquire the property and construct it as part of their facilities. Soon after that application was initiated and It went to Planning Commission. Special Kids was presented with an opportunity to purchase the property immediately adjacent to the property, which you considered and did recommend or did decide to change zoning to CH. And so that's the parcel in purple. Special Kids is looking at acquiring the 2 parcels located south of East Main Street, shaded orange and purple on the maps before you. The property owner that is to the contiguous southern property line that is blue, it's zone PCD, Mr. Milton Cranford, became aware of the application by Special Kids and has requested to join the application and have his property zone changed from Planned Commercial District, which is to allow a home-based construction company, to CH, and the CH zone would allow the use by right for which the PCD currently allows. So this application is to rezone approximately 1.13 acres of property consisting of 2 parcels located south of East Main Street and along Arnett Street from PCD and RM12 to CH Commercial Highway District. Mr. Matt Taylor is present in the audience this evening. He does not have a presentation prepared, but is available to answer any questions you may have about this application. I, of course, will be glad to answer any questions you may have, but you should conduct a public hearing prior to making your decision. The 5 members of the Planning Commission that were present the evening of this public hearing did unanimously recommend to you that this zoning change be approved.
Thank you, Ms. Green. Are there any questions for Ms. Green regarding this proposed amendment or zoning change before I open the public hearing? If not, I'll open the public hearing at this time. Anyone wishing to speak for or against this proposal, please step to the microphone and give us your name and address. Is anyone here wishing to speak? Anyone at all? Last chance. I'll close the public hearing at this time. We'll consider for passage on first reading an ordinance to rezone areas located along East Main Street and Arnett Street to Highway Commercial CH District.
Move for approval.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Young. Mr. Gilly, please call the roll. Ms. Wright.
Mr. Gilly.
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Washington.
Aye.
Mr. Young.
Aye.
Mayor Bragg.
Aye. Pursuant to a resolution adopted by City Council on July 25, 2013, we'll conduct a public hearing to consider a proposed amendment of approximately 18.9 acres of planned unit development PUD district located along Hillwood Drive. Mr. John Harney is the applicant. Notice of the said public hearing was published in the August 4, 2013 issue of a local newspaper. Ms. Green, please proceed.
Thank you, sir. The next public hearing is for you to consider amending the existing PUD or Planned Unit District zone for property located north of Old Fort Parkway or Highway 96. This property, which is approximately 18.9 acres, is a portion of the larger planned development known as Hillwood. A portion of Hillwood has been constructed with some multifamily apartments, and those are located to the east of the subject area. This application is the illustration is showing the orange portion of property, which is just a smaller portion of the Hillwood property, as the requested area, as the request is to amend the PUD only for this section at this time. The PUD for this property currently would permit 139 townhome-style condominium units, multifamily type development with private streets. This PUD was zoned in this manner in 2007. Since that time, the property owner feels that the townhouse-style condominium is not the best option for this area and is requesting to change the zoning so that this property can be developed with 71 single-family detached dwellings. So it's going from condominiums, which is a form of multifamily development, to single-family detached dwellings, which are single-family houses located on their own lots. The streets would be public streets, as you would normally see in a single-family detached dwelling. There are, in your packets, a program book that outlines the specifics of the changes, but I'm going to invite Mr. Matt Taylor or Mr. John Harney, if he has anything to add to the application, to come to the lectern and go over the details of this application. If you have questions about it, I will be glad to answer them either before or after the public hearing. The Planning Commission did recommend approval of this request unanimous.
Good evening, council members. My name is Matt Taylor of SCC here in town. We're located at 850 Middle Tennessee Boulevard. As Ms. Ely said, we are requesting a PUD amendment to the previously approved Hillwood PUD. The property is located just to the north of Highway 96 and to the east of the Blackman Farm subdivision. The requested PUD area for this amendment is just over 18.5 acres. The main change is to go from an attached townhome-style condominium product to detached single-family homes that are very similar to what is constructed in the Blackman Farm subdivision to the east. We are looking to decrease the total number of units by 68. The homes in this portion of the property will be range in size from 1,450 square feet to 2,000 plus. We anticipate these to be constructed of a mixture of materials ranging from cement board siding, stone, brick, and vinyl. We've included some example elevations of those homes on 10 and 11, pages 10 and 11 of your zoning book. With the previously approved Hillwood PUD, there was a 30-foot wide landscape / preservation easement that was agreed to along the Blackman Farms subdivision's shared property line with this property. We're not proposing to change that at all and leave that in place. In addition, we are also dedicating a 20-foot wide common space where this property abuts the existing and previously constructed apartments. That will act as a buffer between the single-family homes and those multifamily units. We are proposing that to be planted with a double row staggered of evergreen trees. And of course, like all of our subdivisions, we'll meet the stormwater ordinance for quality and quantity, as well as be providing sidewalks along both sides of all of our public streets here. Other than that, myself or Mr. Harney are both available for any questions you may have.
Question?
Mr. Taylor, do
Yes,
you
sir.
know which elementary school these dwellings will be committed to?
I do not, off the top of my head.
Any other questions?
I want to make sure I understand. You're going from 139 units to 71 units?
Yes, sir. That's almost a 50% reduction. We're almost cutting that in half.
And the reason I asked my question was based on that same comment that he just asked. If with the reduction, we should see an actual improvement in the number of students being required to
Yes, sir.
be educated from that parameter.
If I had to guess, I would guess that's Blackman, but I'm not
Blackman
positive.
Elementary, or
Yes,
maybe
sir.
the New West School.
Possibly.
All right, if there are no other questions, I'll open the public hearing at this time. Anyone wishing to speak for or against, please step to the microphone and give us your name and address. Is anyone here wishing to speak toward this proposed amendment? Anyone at all? Last chance. I'll close the public hearing at this time, and we'll consider for passage on first reading an ordinance amending approximately 18.9 acres of planned unit development, PUD district located along Hillwood Drive.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and second. Mr. Gilly, Mr. Smotherman, please call the roll. Ms. Wright.
Mr. Gilly.
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Washington.
Aye.
Mr. Young.
Aye.
Mayor Bragg.
Aye. At this time, pursuant to a resolution adopted by City Council on July 25, 2013, we'll conduct a public hearing to consider annexation of approximately 27 acres located along Veterans Parkway and consider for the same a proposed plan of services. Wright Family Real Estate Partnership, LP. Mr. Thomas L. Reed, Jr. and Ms. Mary K. Wright are the applicants. Notice of the said public hearing was published in the August 4, 2013 issue of a local newspaper. Ms. Green, proceed.
Thank you, sir. Our next public hearing is to consider the annexing of approximately 28.61 acres located along Veterans Parkway. It's located along the eastern side of Veterans Parkway, and this annexation study does include 778 linear feet of Veterans Parkway right-of-way that is along the frontage of these parcels. The property is located just north of Franklin Road or Highway 96. You can see that the annexation includes the entirety of 2 parcels and the majority of a third parcel. The third parcel to the north does have a portion of property that is not included in the annexation study and recommendation, and that is a 30-foot wide strip along the northern property line located along this parcel and city limits to the north. By leaving that strip of property out of the area being studied for annexation, the properties that are located to the east, which are currently in the unincorporated area of Rutherford County, are not included in this annexation study. If the 30-foot strip were included in the annexation of this parcel, then the city would need to look at annexing the properties, the developed subdivisions to the east. The parcels that have come before you tonight have been requested to be annexed by the property owners. They do not include two parcels that are located between them, and you can see the white rectangular-shaped parcels. Each of those have a single-family house, but are not included in the annexation study. I have included in your agenda materials a plan of service and feasibility study which outlines the services the city can provide to these parcels, when we can provide them, and that time frame for when we will be providing those services. City services will be available, the majority of city services will be available immediately upon annexation becoming effective for these parcels. City sewer is located along Overall Creek, which borders this property to the east. The owners, as I mentioned, have petitioned the city to annex these properties. The Planning Commission did hold a public hearing prior to making their decision regarding this annexation request. The next two public hearings are companion zoning change requests that will deal with this property. At this time, the public hearing to be held will be for the annexation of these parcels only and not a part of the zoning change requests, which are the next two items on tonight's agenda. If you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer them. Mr. John Harney represents the applicants, and he's here this evening, and as is Mr. Kevin Gunther. I don't think that Mr. Gunther has a presentation at this time, but would probably want to speak at the zoning. If you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer them. The Planning Commission did recommend approval unanimously with all 5 members present that evening.
All right, are there any questions before I open the public hearing regarding this annexation of approximately 27 acres? All right, if there are no questions from the council, I'll open the public hearing. Anyone wishing to speak for or against this annexation, please step forward to the microphone. This is only concerning the annexation.
Mayor and Council, my name is Jeff Rainwater, 1030 Brinkston Run. I live in the Blackman area, which is very, very close, not far from this area here. The one concern I have about the annexation, specifically about that, is while I do see they're leaving a 30-foot wide section so that the area just to the east of this property could be left out because of no islands allowed in the city state law thing, I do think this leaving a very thin strip there and creating kind of a lollipop into the city is pretty much circumventing the spirit of the law, not necessarily the letter of the law. And there was very specific reasons that was done by the state legislature. And I think by leaving just a little strip out and, you know, creating in essence a island or a peninsula that looks like an island, I think that's basically finding a circumvention around the law that was there for a reason, not to create these islands of unincorporated area within surrounded completely by incorporated area. I think that's not exactly what the city should be doing there. I think they should definitely, you know, if, you know, a little more than 30 feet. I think 30 feet is a little on the bare minimum, barely meet the letter of the law. Don't think we're really meeting the spirit of the law or what the legislature meant there, or the will of the people. So that's what I was saying. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak for or against?
Hi, yes, my name is Steve Blades. I live at 418 Ossabaw Drive, inside the cloister on Veterans Parkway. And I'm here to talk about the annexation of this property directly south of the property that joins the community that I live in. This is about city services and extending city services into that area, and one of those areas is schools. And during the last meeting of the city council, the school high-density study was presented. I've had quite a bit of time to go through the documentation on that, and I want to bring up some numbers that I think are very important. Within Blackman High School right now, multi-family residential housing students, there are 164 students at the high school, 62 at the middle school, and 110 at the elementary school. This is already at a percentage of 7% in the high school, 5.78 in the middle school, and 9.98 in the elementary school. Now, the reason that I bring those numbers up and why it's important is because the average for all of Murfreesboro is 6.9% in the high schools, 7.4% in the middle schools, and 6.7% at the county level elementary and 3.4% at the city level elementary. So you can see that there are some drastic differences already in this area in these schools that are already considered to be overpopulated. Also looking at those numbers a little differently, there are 9 different multifamily communities currently servicing the Blackman School District that total 2,658 units available. That's for the 240 roundabout students that come out of there. Now, I had to take a deep look at the study because there are almost 40 pages to that, including all of the different maps and graphs and charts. And I tried to pick out the one area that stood out the most because, honestly, I think I mentioned at the last meeting, I've only been back in Tennessee for about a month, so I don't know Murfreesboro that in-depth yet. I'm learning very quickly. What I did find was that the largest concentration of multifamily homes in the entire Murfreesboro area right now appear to be around the Oakland High School and Oakland Middle School districts. What I found there was that there are 49 communities, multifamily communities, that service those 2 schools right now. The units for that are 6,068, nearly 3 times that in the Blackman community right now. And of that, there are only 330 students from all 49 communities in that area. The reason that this is important is looking at the age of those communities. Those communities, I don't think there are very many of them that were constructed within the last decade. And quite honestly, if you start to look at the numbers of students in each one, you've got 1 student here, 2 students there, 4 students here, 2 students there in the Oakland areas, whereas in the Blackman area, you have 24 high schoolers in 2 different communities, 45 in another community. The numbers are drastically different. They're newer communities. They attract younger families, and it is one of the best school systems in the state right now. The Blackman High School is ranked 11th out of 314 schools, whereas right now the Oakland High School is number 34 out of 314 schools. Blackman Middle School is 14th out of 306 middle schools, and the Oakland High School is 136th out of 306. That really speaks to the number of students that are in those areas and how overcrowded they are. And right now, the plans for increase in the Blackman community are so drastic. Really have to look at how that's going to affect those schools. And every community plays in. Mr. Taylor here has just said that he's changing over a community that they already had planned for multi-residential right next to Blackman Farms, right next to an apartment complex they had already built, and decided to change that from multi-residential into single-family homes. This kind of speaks against what we talked about in the last meeting, how they thought some of the market was what drives all of these apartments being brought into the area. I'm just trying to look at the long-term goals of the city and where it's going to affect all of us. And that's what I have to say.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak for or against?
Good evening, Mayor Bragg, council members. Kevin Gunther with Huddleston Steel, 2115 Northwest Broad. Speaking specifically to the annexation request this evening, our applicants do want to point out that the services that were studied by the city, including the schools, the response that was received was they felt there were services to be provided to these properties. And we're asking for that annexation in the context of urban growth boundary of the city, some major infrastructure that is along Veterans Parkway, and that is the context that we are asking for the annexation. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak for or against?
Yes, Virgil Barnes. I'm at 5427 Cloister Drive. Thank you for your time.
The name of the drive?
Cloister Drive.
Cloister.
So my property would be
Very
adjacent
to this, yeah.
the subject matter. And just on the topic of annexation, When I look at the legislative intent, when we talk about land use and urban growth and plans for cities to expand, I think the intent of Public Chapter 1101, its emphasis is actually on curbing this urban sprawl and encouraging development on lands already in the municipality. And so I'm a little confused of why we would even contemplate approving a proposal that would increase the density within this town. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak for or against? Anyone at all? Last chance. I'll close the public hearing. We'll consider for passage on first reading an ordinance annexing an area located along Veterans Parkway and adopt for the same a plan of services.
So moved. Second.
Mr. Gilly and Mr. Young, motion and second. Please call the roll, Ms. Wright.
Mr. Gilly.
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Washington.
Aye.
Mr. Young.
Aye.
Mayor Bragg.
Aye. This time, pursuant to a resolution adopted by City Council on July 25th, 2013, we'll conduct a public hearing to consider a proposed amendment to zone approximately 10.6 acres located along Veterans Parkway as highway commercial, CH District, simultaneous with annexation. The Wright Family Real Estate Partnership, LP, is the applicant. Notice of the said public hearing was published in the August 4th, 2013 issue of a local newspaper. Ms. Green, please proceed.
Thank you, Mayor. Our next public hearing is to consider zoning a portion of the property we just studied for annexation CH simultaneous with its annexation. The portion of property which is requesting the CH zone is identified in blue on the map that's before you, and it's approximately 10.6 acres. The property, again, is located along Veterans Parkway, along the eastern side of Veterans Parkway, just north of the intersection of Franklin Road and Veterans Parkway. It includes the entirety of one parcel, which, again, is just a little over 10 acres. This parcel is located immediately adjacent to land that is zoned CH and fronts Veterans Road, so you can see the property that's contiguous with this parcel to the south is zoned CH, and those 9 parcels to the south are zoned CH. So the request before you is to zone this property CH simultaneous with its annexation. Currently, it's zoned for residential agricultural purposes in Rutherford County. The Blackman Land Use Study future land use map depicts an area for commercial development at the northeast corner of the intersection of Veterans Parkway and Franklin Road. The plan does not indicate a specific amount of acres for the commercial area. The application is not inconsistent with the plan. The Planning Commission did study this request, and all 5 members unanimously recommend that the property be zoned CH simultaneous with its annexation. Again, Mr. Kevin Gunther and John Harney are representing the applicants. If you have any questions regarding this request, I'll be glad to answer them either before or after the public hearing. And then the next map that I put up shows just this parcel requesting the CH zone.
All right, Ms. Any questions for Ms. Green before I open the public hearing? Mr. Young.
Ms. Green, would you consider the the intersection of the Veterans Parkway and 96 to be a commercial node?
Yes, sir. It would fit the definition of a commercial node.
Okay. All right. Now, let's talk about the floodplain that backs up the creek.
Okay.
Is that a floodplain or floodway or both?
It's both, sir. The flood plain, and I don't have a good map for you, sorry. What is expected to be the channel of water is identified as the floodway on the flood insurance rate maps that are issued by FEMA. No development can happen in that floodway. The floodplain does allow development, as you can see from the single-family development to the north. However, it has to meet certain standards. If it's a commercial development, the structures need to be flood-proofed. And if it's a residential development, then they need to be elevated above an elevation identified by FEMA. So there is a significant portion of the property that will not be able to be developed because it's in the floodway. However, the portion of property located in the floodplain can be developed.
Is it fair to say that the floodway would serve as an additional buffer to the residents at the east?
I think certainly it will add distance between the adjacent use, and that distance alone will also add a buffer, as well as the landscaping that is, or the plant material that's located along the floodway. We do have a water quality protection area along a 35 feet plus a 15-foot, so a 50-foot area along the waterway, which needs to remain undisturbed, and so that landscaping will, in addition to the distance, will serve as a buffer.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Young. Any other questions? If not, I'll open the public hearing at this time. Anyone wishing to speak for or against this amendment to zone approximately 10.6 acres, please step to the microphone and give us your name and address.
Yes, thank you again, Mayor Bragg, council members. Kevin Gunther with Huddleston Steel, 2115 Northwest Broad, Murfreesboro, Tennessee. As we had been able to hear from Ms. Green, there is one very positive thing about this area as far as the commercial zoning request, and that is we are at the major intersection of two arterial roadways. The reason that we are requesting the commercial highway is not only is there existing commercial highway at that intersection, this allows us to create a parcel that is the right size, the right configuration for the type of development that could occur at a node. So that is one of the main reasons we are requesting this commercial highway be added to our zoning here. The other thing is, there again within context, we do have major infrastructure in place that would serve the type of commercial highway development that could occur on the parcel. And for those reasons, we are requesting that you would approve this evening. I'll be available, as well as Mr. Harney, for any questions you may have.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak? For or against? Anyone at all? Last chance? If not, I'll close the public hearing at this time. We'll consider for passage on first reading an ordinance to zone an area located along Veterans Parkway as Highway Commercial CH District simultaneous with annexation.
Move for approval.
Second.
Motion and second. Mr. Washington and Mr. Smotherman. Thank you. Please call the roll, Ms. Wright.
Mr. Gilly.
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Washington.
Aye.
Mr. Young.
Aye.
Mayor Bragg.
Aye. At this time, pursuant to a resolution adopted by City Council on July 25, 2013, we'll conduct a public hearing to consider a proposed amendment to zone approximately 16.4 acres located along Veterans Parkway as residential multifamily 16 RM16 district, simultaneous with annexation. Wright Family Real Estate Partnership, LP, is the applicant. Notice of the said public hearing was published in the August 4, 2013 issue of a local newspaper. Ms. Green, please proceed.
Thank you. Our final public hearing this evening is to consider a zoning change for the remainder of the property for which you considered annexation of this evening. This is the area that's shaded purple on the map before you. It includes the entirety of one parcel, which is the center parcel, and the majority of the northern parcel, excluding a 30-foot strip as discussed in the annexation. This property is located just east of Veterans Parkway, north of the intersection of Veterans Parkway and Franklin Road, and Overall Creek runs along this property's rear property line, which is to the east. These two parcels together consist of approximately 16.4 acres, and they are immediately adjacent to the land for which you approved a request to zone CH simultaneous with the annexation. The parcels combined have sufficient size and shape to allow development of a multifamily complex or campus, and by my estimate, that would be approximately 270 dwelling units that could possibly be developed on this property. The property owners have requested this property be zoned RM16, and that's multifamily residential district simultaneous with the annexation. It's their belief that the RM16 zone would serve as a good buffer between the CH zones to the south and the PRD zone to the north. That PRD zone is for the Cloister single-family subdivision, and so this would be a residential use, which they believe would be a good transition between those two districts. The 30-foot strip that was not included in the annexation of these parcels, and which is identified on the maps on the screen, is to propose a dual purpose. It's to allow the annexations of the parcels so that there's no other property that needs to be considered for annexation, but also the area of the 30-foot strip would be required to include a type C buffer where if the property is to develop as a multifamily development as requested. The type C buffer is 12 feet wide and includes a significant amount of landscaping. The applicants have reserved 30 feet as a matter of, I think, what they've termed good practice. Both parcels are zoned for residential purposes, or residential and agricultural purposes in Rutherford County, and would be zoned RS-15 without a companion zoning change request. They have made a zoning change request for you to consider the RM-16 zoning classification. The Planning Commission did consider this item and study it, and the night of the public hearing recommended this zoning change to RM-16 simultaneous with the annexation unanimously. Again, Mr. Kevin Gunther is here this evening representing the property owners, and Mr. John Harney. If you have any, I think they may want to speak at the public hearing, but if you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer them either before or after the public hearing, as well as the representatives.
Any questions before I open the public hearing?
Mayor?
Yes, Mr. Young.
Ms. Green, you said something that I want to make sure I understand. You said the transitional zone, the transition between commercial highway and residential is a good zone would be from going from commercial to residential would be from commercial to multifamily to residential.
That's right.
Is that?
Yes, sir. That's what I said.
Okay.
I hope I said that.
Any other questions? If not, I'll open the public hearing at this time. Anyone wishing to speak for or against this proposed amendment to zone approximately 16.4 acres along Veterans Parkway, please step to the microphone and give us your name and address.
Thank you. My name is Virgil Barnes, and I live at 5427 Cloister Drive. So my property would be adjacent to the property on topic tonight. I think there are many residents that are anxious to see this area retain the characteristics and what inspired us to put our original investment in that area. I think this zoning would authorize an apartment that is incompatible with the surrounding area, which would have the potential to harm the Blackman area, specifically the people that are closest to the apartment. I think it would harm the area in several ways. I think the zoning district would authorize a significant amount of new residents, which would likely dramatically increase the amount of traffic in the area and would likely overburden the local road network and make these roads much less safe. Also, I think this zoning district authorizes uses that will likely generate excessive lighting glare and noises that will damage the quiet character of the area that's in place right now. As I mentioned earlier with the annexation, I believe this encourages the urban sprawl that will erode and damage the character of the area surrounding the apartments. And then finally, I think the rezoning could possibly be considered spot zoning, and that is upzoning of property to a more intensive use than before, with the effect of allowing development inconsistent with the surrounding area and transferring that benefit to the property owner over the detriment to others, people like me that are in the cloister right now. So more specifically, we're talking about taking a small tract surrounded by vastly larger, uniformly zoned area, and the rezoning would relieve the property, the apartments, from restrictions to which the rest of the area is subjected. So for the reasons stated above, the rezoning will adversely affect the use and enjoyment of our properties and will thereby adversely affect our property values. We do have a specific personal and legal interest in the subject matter affected by the rezoning and are directly and adversely affected. We will suffer special damages distinct from the rest of the community if this rezoning is approved. So the above was more of my arguments, stating facts. And then finally, I'd like to end more on an emotional rant, and that is just I think we need to slow down and really think about the direction of Murfreesboro and the way we want to go. I think we need to focus on creating jobs in a sustainable city, one where we don't have to commute as much. So I know that it's been in the press that, way to go, we landed, Amazon distribution center, but we're still getting beat and we're still traveling to other cities. that are more progressive and that are either bringing in or creating Fortune 500 companies, and we're just sort of stuck, don't really know which way to go. Do we want to be more historic? Do we want to be more progressive? And we're just, all we're doing is building more apartments and residents and not really going after some innovations that I think that'll carry us into the next century. For instance, Franklin has attracted Nissan North American headquarters and a lot of new businesses with shiny corporate offices, and I really don't see that. So I think until we get our act together, all we can do is boast that our second tallest building is a prison. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak?
Steve Blades, 418 Ossabaw Drive. Speaking directly to this zoning request itself, and not to harp so much on the services side of things, but to speak more to the supply and demand side of things. I've been reading where there are a lot of rezoning requests all across Murfreesboro, and I think at the last meeting there was a comment that mentioned thousands of rental units being added to Murfreesboro. And can anyone tell me how many units are being proposed right now across the entire Murfreesboro city area? Anyone? Mr. McFarland had a number last time, and I want to say it was something like 5,000. That might even be low. He might have said something higher. Do we have enough of a demand to fill a supply of 5,000 housing units in Murfreesboro? Even if that demand comes from Nashville and surrounding areas, is there enough to fill 5,000 plus units in this area? I don't think that there is. I don't think that there's that much economic growth right now, or even in the foreseeable future, to sustain that kind of supply. And then what I see happening is you've got all of these different communities that are not at capacity, and they're starting to have rental wars and dropping their rates to try to fill up their units as much as they can. I don't see this as a plus for this city, and what I see is not something that's going to create long-term sustainability, something that's going to create long-term jobs here in this area. I see something that looks like a short-term housing boom market for construction, and then that's it. And is that really what we want? Is that going to be enough to carry us forward for the next 20 years? Mr. McFarland brought up at the last meeting that Harding Place was a great place 20, 30 years ago. It's a very dangerous place right now. And it's the exact same kind of saturation that we're looking at within Murfreesboro with the zoning requests that we're seeing right now. Out of the 9 different properties that I talked about a moment ago in the Blackman area, 3 of them have signs marketing right in front of them saying Blackman Schools. That's why they're coming here. That's why they're coming to build, is because they see that we've got the top 3% in the state, and they know that that's something that all these young families want. And I agree that that's a big draw. But is it enough of a draw? And do we have the systems in place to sustain that? And I don't think that those questions have been fully answered yet. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Others wishing to speak?
Julie Verdoni, 5239 Cloister Drive, also in the Cloister. My property doesn't abut the parcel in question. However, speaking off both of what Duke and Steve had said, both in terms of the quality of the units that are being proposed, the type of units, rental units, bringing in more transient population to the area, not just traffic. This is, again, I'm not working off statistics, but I spoke with Mr. McFarland a bit about, he said that there was a budgetary request to do a proposal for some long-term planning, and instead of moving forward before having some of those plans in place, perhaps waiting in terms of the neighborhood, in terms of what was mentioned in traffic and quality of life. I spoke on a couple of occasions where I've spoken to Murfreesboro Police about neighborhoods and what happens when you bring in these renters or have more rental units, more transient type of population, somebody who's not stable in the community, somebody who's not contributing to Murfreesboro, who hasn't committed necessarily to living here, buying property, and just what kind of the Cloister is a wonderful community. It was mentioned already in terms of the quality of life, the security, the neighborhood, the type of neighborhood, and building this multifamily development will change the dynamics of that area, I think, significantly. I've spoken to several neighbors. They've already put their houses on markets in fear of what's happening in that neighborhood. Do we want to drive people who bought property in Murfreesboro out or to other regions? I think that there's a lot of discussion that needs to happen before this gets pushed forward, not just for the impact on the schools, but for the community as a whole. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Jacob Bogle. I live at 1211 Hazelwood Street. I've got a comment and question, and maybe if you guys can clear it up for me. I was under the impression that annexations weren't allowed, period, unless the county signed off on them. And I'm curious, has that, could someone explain that?
Ms. McGannon, you may wish to speak to that.
Yes. There is an exception in the law when the annexation is requested by the owners.
Okay.
In this case, it was requested by the owners.
Okay, there's just been a lot of confusion with a lot of people, and so. And then the next thing, I'm curious, a lot of these properties, actually this one and the last two, fall within the Greenway Master Plan. And I'm curious if the applicants realize that at least a portion of the property is at risk of being taken by the city at some point in the future. And that's all I've got.
Thank you. Anything else? Anyone else wishing to speak?
Hello, I'm back. Jeff Rainwater, 1030 Race to Run. I'll try not to say the same thing I said last time I was here. So, as you know, I've been very vocal about oversaturation of apartment complexes in the Blackman area, and what's really going on here is, like the lady spoke just a minute ago was talking about, is we're getting a little too fast here. We're getting way out of mix on single-family dwellings, townhouses, apartments. And I do have a concern that, we're going to wind up with apartment complexes that aren't full and getting into price wars and driving down prices and so forth, which will drive down general prices in the area as those go down, and they're not kept up as nice. This one specifically doesn't have some of the protections that the last one I spoke about a couple of weeks ago has, because this one's not in the overlay district. So, vinyl apartments, whatever you want kind of thing, as long as it meets the requirements. So you don't have that kind of protection. As far as the transitional property discussion, to me that's a little like, because you just annexed and voted for commercial right down from it and created the need for transitional, that's kind of like setting the building on fire and rescuing the people. I mean, you kind of like created the situation and then you're fixing it. I think that's a little, and don't always buy the fact that apartments are the best transitional. Personally, and every owner I've talked to in the area, I'm sure they have a light commercial behind you or commercial fringe, something like that. I know that's been the general consensus of everybody I talked to, and even some dealings I had with rezoning behind a house I owned years ago. And when we get into these apartments, our schools are overcrowded right now. This year so far, you've added, 1,200 units to the area. That's a significant thing that's, as they get built out, could be built out within a year and a half. If that happens, you're looking at overloading a school that already has portable sitting out in front of it. I know we're building a new elementary school, but we also have junior high and high schools to deal with that have portable sitting in front of them. Not to mention that all of them won't necessarily go to one school, and we can't tell them which school to actually go to. So we do have significant issues with those type of things in the area, And like the gentleman was saying earlier, we got a much higher percentage of apartments coming into this specific area. And we don't really need one area of town to be known as like apartment town. We need to spread this out across the entire city. I'm not saying we don't need apartments, because I drive by one apartment complex on the way to my house every day. It's called Bell Murfreesboro. It's a very nice community. A lot of people out of that community have bought townhouses in my neighborhood. And then some of those people have turned around and bought down the street from me. And it's great, because it gives a young couple a chance to move into an apartment in a nice area and keep going. We overdo that, though, we're going to get into trouble. We're going to have way too many of it. Then you're going to have too much of that versus the houses. People won't want to buy the houses because they'll be concerned about property values. Then you get into this mix of what are you going to build in that area. So I'm very concerned about that, the schools and the community as a whole. As far as the planning goes, I do think we need to take a step back. Until we get some planning on the board, we need to think about not overloading an area. We do have the Blackman land use study that's basically mandated. We update it every time we approve a large subdivision. That never happened. The city never did it, and then really should have, because that changes how the mix goes into the next phase of it. So, we definitely need to slow this down a little bit and not overbuild. If you're approving another subdivision next door that had 1,000 houses in it, a couple hundred apartments, okay, yeah, I can see that. You're also passing up the opportunity for a planned unit apartment. And also take a look at this property. It's kind of cut up. What's going to go on this, and how's it going to go on it? Not to mention the fact that I believe the floodway goes all the way almost to the white parcel. So take a look at that too, and think about how this would really work. Take a long look at that. So, and in closing, I want to. This is probably, in my opinion, the most important thing I've ever said to the City Council. Give the MRAP back, please. Thank you.
What was that?
The MRAP back.
MRAP.
The new military vehicle with the police department.
Oh, okay. All right. Anyone else wishing to speak?
Hi, Reg Cromwell, 421 Ostabah Drive in the Cloister. I don't have any prepared remarks. I just want to lend my voice of support. A lot of our neighbors weren't able to make it tonight. Everyone I've spoken to in the neighborhood obviously concerned about the detrimental effects it'll have on the neighborhood. I wanted to thank Steve and was it Virgil and Julie for the research they did. Looks like they were well prepared. But I just want to concur with their remarks, and I represent a lot of people that weren't here tonight. So, thank you.
Thank you. Others wishing to speak for or against? Okay. You did on the previous one. Thank you. Welcome.
Good evening once again, Mayor Bragg, council members. Kevin Gunther with Huddleston Steel, 2115 Northwest Broad, Murfreesboro, Tennessee. I believe we've talked at length about infrastructure, and that's there for the site. We've talked a little bit about context. Think about what's around us. We've got commercial to the south. We have a major arterial to the west. We have a planned residential development to the north, which is a very nice neighborhood. The lots immediately to the north of us are about 6,000 square feet. It is a planned community, and that equates to about 5 or 6 units per acre. And then we have a very large green space to the east of us created by Overall Creek. So I think there's a context here for what we're asking for. What is it that we're asking for? We're asking for residential density. We're asking for the flexibility to allow for some residential density. That may be apartments, that may be townhomes, it may be attached single family. So what we're requesting is not necessarily just apartments. We're saying that, yes, this higher density residential is appropriate between commercial and the planned development. What is it that ensures some of the things that have been brought up tonight? I think they're very valid things. We've heard words like innovation, sustainability, quality of life. High-density residential does not have to be low quality. High-density residential does not have to be unsustainable. In fact, I think if done correctly, high-density residential can achieve all of those things. So that's what we're asking for with the RM16. We're asking for the flexibility to create that high-density residential pocket. It might be any number of things. I think that what warrants good design is your site plan process. And what warrants good design will be when there is a project brought here, give that property owner the opportunity to do that density, work with the floodplain, work with the infrastructure to create something that is a quality community. So once again, we do request your approval of the RM16 as a high-density residential opportunity for the applicant. Thank you.
Thank you. Others wishing to speak? Anyone else? Last chance. All right, I'll close the public hearing at this time. We'll consider for passage on first reading an ordinance to zone an area located along Veterans Parkway as residential multifamily 16, RM16 district, simultaneous with annexation.
Move for passage on first reading, Mayor.
Mr. Gilly?
Second.
This is a second. Mr. Young, please call the roll.
Mr. Gilly?
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Washington?
Let me make a comment if I can.
Sure.
Okay.
Vice Mayor?
I really do appreciate all the homeowners and property owners, and this young man here in the middle here, I forget his name, that's been here consistently. That's what the public process should be all about, even if it doesn't go your way. I was on the Planning Commission from 93 to 2002. Those public hearings on the first Wednesday night were brutal. That's why I got off the Planning Commission. And you hear a bunch of comments, and these two guys on the Planning Commission now, so they've heard a lot of this, probably 2 or 3 times or more. But there's certain documents, I heard enough misinformation to scream a little bit, but I'm not going to deal with that. But I do know that Public Chapter 1101 was designed for a particular reason. It puts the boundaries where growth cannot go, to be honest with you. Then there was the Blackman land use study done by the city that addresses that. And I thought I heard one more inaccurate statement about every time a development is passed, you have to come back and restudy the. Did I hear that?
I believe that was said, Mr. Washington. I don't recall that statement in the study. Mr. Adelot, if could be more expert about that, we can certainly give a report to the council at a subsequent meeting.
Okay. Well, I didn't know it either. So, and there's things that have gone into place, and plus, you're at that area is at the fringe of the urban growth boundary. I think the other side of Veterans is one place, and one side is the other. Our Milton Selective Agreement with MED is basically almost like the urban growth boundary. So there was a lot of thought and development years ago that went into how this area will be managed and how this area would grow, sort of, kind of. I do agree with those land use studies, all of them, need to be re-looked at this particular time, especially with the economy get back on an uptick. But I just said for the public's knowledge that need to make those statements to let you know that there's a lot of stuff that was done before all of this happened. Veterans Parkway is there for a reason. There's a lot of investment, more that's going to go out there before, and I hate that some folks may leave, but I want you to know that you need to keep up with that process, and it was looked at and tried to see what might happen 15, 20 years ago. So it wasn't like it just happened yesterday. Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Mr. Washington votes aye.
Mr. Young?
Aye.
Mayor Bragg?
Aye. Thank you all who spoke. We appreciate you being here. We'll certainly take your voices into consideration as we do every week. I know it appears that we're going quickly, but in many instances, these things have been on the table for years. And Public Chapter 1101 had some notice requirements. The county government, the cities worked together to try to decide where growth was going to be. We have a major thoroughfare plan that impacts land use. One of the reasons your area is very popular is very similar to when I grew up, the area along Tennessee Boulevard was popular because it was on the edges of the city. It had a good transportation network, and it had good schools, and people wanted to live there. That was 66 years ago. So these are not new issues that we face. These are issues that we try to come together and educate and work with all our community partners. The Cloister is a lovely place. When you drive by it, I've not driven in it. I want to keep traffic down on your streets, but I have driven by it. It is a beautiful area, and it will continue to be that area. And now there will be some services available to you where you will not clog up somebody else's city street. You'll have some services out at your area. So we have planned that. We have looked at it, again, for years, long before I was on this council. So, again, I appreciate you being here. We respect and honor your requests and what you're saying and thinking. And we hope you'll continue to help us make Murfreesboro a great place to live, especially in the newer areas of our community that we want to be sustainable and attractive places to live and work and raise a family. Thank you for being here. At this time, we'll consider recommendations of the Planning Commission to schedule public hearings to consider rezoning along Oval Hessen Lane, rezoning north of Salem Highway at Kinsale Avenue, PRD, annexation petition along Elam Road, zoning along Elam Road, RS-8 simultaneous with annexation, and annexation petition south of John Bragg Highway, and rezoning along east side of Cason Lane. Mr. Adelot, welcome.
Thank you, Mayor Bragg, members of the council. During its regular meeting on August 7th of 2013, the Planning Commission conducted public hearings on the items that you just listed. After the public hearings, the Planning Commission recommended the approval of all of them. The council needs to schedule those items for public hearings at some date as Ms. McGannon may recommend.
Ms. McGannon.
Mayor, I would recommend September 26th.
September the 26th. Council members, you have that option. I will not be here, but certainly I will be here. That's September. I will not be here. Sorry, September. So y'all can go ahead and have all the fun you want to. Council members, you have this date. Is it convenient?
Move we set the public hearings on September 26th.
September the 26th, public hearings. Please call the roll. See, we have a second? Mr. Young seconds.
Mr. Gilly?
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Washington? Aye. Mr. Young?
Aye.
Mayor Bragg?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Adelot. At this time, we'll consider recommendations of the Chief of Police and the Chief of Fire and Rescue requesting to reallocate unencumbered 2012 CIP funds. Welcome, Chief Toombs and Chief Christman.
Mayor and Council, good evening again. We have a small item on the agenda this evening for your consideration. We're requesting to reallocate approximately $490,000 from the 2012 capital improvement budget. These amounts, $290,000 of that money roughly, were included for capital improvement projects for the police department. As a portion of larger items, that was a savings as we went about the business of making those purchases and realized savings from our purchasing process. Likewise, the Murfreesboro Fire and Rescue Department was able to realize a savings of a couple $100,000 from projected expenditures for the purchase of various pieces of fire apparatus. We're requesting tonight that the council would reallocate those unencumbered funds from those line items where they were originally proposed into the item that would fund our capital improvement investment in our police fire and rescue training facility. We are in the planning stages of that facility already, and would like to ask that those funds, those unencumbered funds, be reallocated to that line. I'll be glad to answer any questions that you may have, and Deputy Chief Toombs is here to represent fire.
Chief, what's the total amount for both?
$490,000 $490,134.63, Mr. Young.
Thank you, sir.
All right, any further questions regarding this request? If not, is there a motion?
First, I'd like to say thank you for saving us money, and then second, I'll move for approval.
Second.
Thank you. Young, Mr. Washington, please call the roll, Ms. Wright.
Mr. Gilly.
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Washington.
Aye.
Mr. Young.
Aye.
Mayor Bragg.
Aye. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for being here.
Chief Chrisman, while you're there.
Yes, sir.
I know it's come up in this meeting. I've heard it 2 or 3 times already this week about the new MRAP vehicle that we've acquired. And you and I had a conversation prior to this meeting to discuss it. And I'd kind of like, if you would, explain what it is that we've acquired recently and what the intended use for that vehicle is.
I'd be glad to do that, and thank you for providing that opportunity. Unfortunately, Mayor and Council, there are situations that occur for our special weapons teams where we may have to deploy into situations where there are hostile gunfire. We are living in a time where high-powered rifles are more and more a threat to not only our law enforcement officers, but obviously to the citizens that call Murfreesboro home. When those situations arise, if they arise, hopefully they never arise, we have to be able to have a safe way to provide tactical support to protect those innocent citizens whose very lives may be endangered by that situation. But we also have to be able to do that in such a way that it provides some level of reasonable protection for our police officers who have taken additional responsibilities for tactical response to those situations. Simply equipping them with level 3 body armor with armor plates in the shields, and other types of ballistic protection may not be enough if they're facing an adversary who may have long-range, high-power, high-penetration weapons that would be used against the police or could be used against innocent citizens. What this vehicle does is allows us to deploy a tactical team into a scenario like that from a position of cover. Cover is different from concealment. Cover means that you have protection from incoming rounds, and to deploy them in such a way that they can safely advance to that threat, neutralize that threat if need be, extract citizens who may have been injured and may be in the field of fire, and do that in such a way that provides maximum protection for our police officers and for our citizens. And obviously, the interesting thing about this vehicle, it's a surplus vehicle. It was obtained at no cost to the city. On a rating scale from A to F in terms of quality of vehicle, this vehicle was rated a B. It's capable of defeating .50 caliber incoming ammunition, and it's mine resistant. It has a Caterpillar engine in it, and it's 6,000 miles, and the engine looks like it's brand new. So we are thrilled to add it to our fleet of vehicles and hope we never have to use it.
A mine-resistant, ambush-protected vehicle?
Mine-resistant, armor-protected vehicle.
Okay. Any other questions? Any other comments?
No, thank you for your explanation. I just wanted the public to understand because I've had several people ask, and of course, the fact that the vehicle was free, you can't beat the price. But one of the concerns was also the maintenance and upkeep of the vehicle, and if it's rated a B on a scale of A to, what do you say, F, certainly it sounds like it's in pretty good mechanical condition at this point. So I appreciate your comment.
It appears to be. I would add one thing real quickly. Not only do we have staff that has used and helped maintain those vehicles while they were deployed abroad, we have a member of our fleet services staff who also has experience with this vehicle and is able to help with that maintenance.
And then, also given the fact that we didn't have to pay for it, if it were to ever become too expensive to maintain, we simply just take it out of service. Yeah, that's right.
It's a heavy vehicle.
It is.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
All right, at this time, we'll consider recommendations of the Information Technology Director to purchase NEC Voice over IP, VoIP system for citywide telephone upgrade. Mr. Lilly, welcome.
Thank you, Mayor Bragg. Good evening. Good evening, Council. First off, before I get to the Voice over IP, I was able to see that vehicle yesterday, and it pretty nice vehicle, weighed 45,000 pounds, and but I was recommending they paint like a big "Have a nice day," big smiley face on the back, but they just kind of laughed me off. But the technicians out there, they were all kind of shaking their heads as if they knew how to work on it, which I thought was pretty good, and everyone's excited about it. And me getting to look around it, it was pretty exciting. So it's a good thing. Anyway, it's the request and recommendation of the IT department that the council approve the replacement of all telephones and our telephone systems throughout city-managed offices. We're currently supporting a telephony infrastructure containing a conventional analog PBX system. The current system is no longer manufactured, and available telephones and server parts can be challenging, if not impossible, to obtain. Our current system is 20 to 21 years old and is requiring increasing maintenance costs to keep running. The city's existing telephone system is aging, which presents a risk to city operations and customer service. As the hardware associated with the telephone systems age, it becomes less reliable, which results in higher support costs and a potential for increased telephone disruption, including lost voicemails and the inability to communicate internally or externally. Our current hardware, the telephone system, is the vertical ComDial PBX system, which is obsolete. Voicemail server is a ComDial server, which is also obsolete. And the ComDial telephones that we have out to the desk, if we can get them, they're refurbished. So we're dealing with some challenges with that. Technology has changed drastically since this service has been purchased. Telephone network access no longer has to be proprietary to PBX and voice traffic only. Now they have a combined service, which is called Voice over IP, where we can combine our network data with our voice data and put what they call QoS, or quality of service, to meter how much voice and how much network we push over our network. We can beef up our network infrastructure and run both over one infrastructure. Several telephony solutions were reviewed, and NEC provide the most cost-effective and efficient solution that would utilize our existing network hardware and wiring to help reduce implementation costs. NEC would be installed and maintained by our current telephony vendor, which is Black Box, and purchased through the TAPS Cooperative Purchasing Agreement. Fiscal impact, this system would cost approximately $313,211. Going to a system that has a combined infrastructure presents a significant opportunity for return on investment, and that's also located in the breakdown on the write-up. We're looking at now we're paying $5,622.97 for network access for telephony only. With some upgrades to our network infrastructure and going to the voice over IP, combined network fees would be an additional $859.90, and we'd wipe out that $56.22, which would give us a monthly savings of $4,763.07 and a yearly savings of $57,156.84. That presents an opportunity for a projected 100% ROI at 5.5 years. It's the recommendation. We respectfully request approval to purchase the NEC Voice over IP telephone system and all telephony hardware as part of the city's continued investment in its communications and telephony program. This total cost is budgeted in this year's budget, and it also has been approved as part of the IT strategic plan. I now open up for any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Lilly regarding this recommendation?
Mr. Lilly, what's the useful life of this particular one? I know technology changes yearly, but if we've had one for 22 years, Is that a fair question? Or even if it isn't a fair question?
I would say we'd get
5.5 years.
at least 10 years out of it. At least 10 years. Not 20, another 20.
We'll have chips in our ears by then.
Don't you still have a rotary phone?
Yeah, I still got a dial phone.
Mr. Lilly, do we have enough budgeted to cover the expense of what it came in at?
Yes, sir, we do.
So $313,000, but we're going to save $57,000 a year, is that correct?
That is correct.
So 5 years,
6 years.
we'll get a return on investment, is that right?
Yes, sir.
With a system that's going to last 10 years, maybe.
And a whole lot better service, more reliable service.
We've pushed the current system a lot further than it was intended to go. It's really been a challenge to get parts, and this is one of those projects we're very anxious to implement.
Move to my phone system.
All right. Any other questions for Mr. Lilly, or is there a motion that we accept this recommendation?
Move for approval.
Second.
All right. Mr. Young and Vice Mayor Washington, motion and second. Please call the roll.
Mr. Gilly.
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Washington.
Aye.
Mr. Young.
Aye.
Mayor Bragg.
Aye. Thank you, Mr. Lilly.
Thank you.
This time, we'll hear from the Director of the City Schools with regards to technology requests for Murfreesboro City Schools. Dr. Gilbert, it's good to have you here, and Ms. Rainier, thank you for being with us.
Thank you very much. I'd like to acknowledge two folks that really are tremendous helpers. First, the Chief of Police, who is a great colleague and great friend, and also I've gotten to know Mr. Lilly. I noticed Mr. Lilly has a boot on his foot. After hearing where he was yesterday with my friend the Chief, I understand why he has that boot now. Must have been a great machine that you saw there, Mr. Lilly. This evening I'm here, and I enjoy coming to see you all, but I only come to see you when I really need to for the children, and that's why I'm here, because I am asking for funds for a technology proposal that we desperately need for the children. The reason I'm here is because when you think about education, education has changed over the last 50 years, certainly. Schools have changed. But the problem is that the world has changed even faster. If you think about what has happened with communication, if you think about what has happened with transportation, we are beginning now to try to keep up with education. And one way that we can do that is with technology. The push for this really came a couple of years ago when the state moved to what is called Common Core, and we began to implement that. Common Core are standards that are to be taught, but they are assessed online. So this February, our 3rd through 6th grade students will be taking an online test. Next year, all of our students, 3rd through 6th, will be taking all of their TCAP tests online. With Common Core, when you look at those standards, embedded in those standards are technology. For example, in reading language arts, it talks about diverse media. It talks about multimedia. When we think of writing and the standards there, it's talking about using the Internet, taking the Internet resource, using research there, and comparing and contrasting and then writing about that. So we are in need of technology in our schools. As I said, we began this research about 2.5 years ago because our youngest computers were purchased in 2007, so we knew that we were going to have to purchase computers, but we had to wait on the state to see what would be adequate for the park testing. There were 4 questions when we started talking to vendors and we started talking to school districts across Tennessee and also across Georgia and Alabama and North Carolina. Those 4 questions were, what will best prepare children for the future, because that is what we're about. What will satisfy the park test? What will put as many devices as possible into the students' hands? If we want our children to operate the same way we operate every day, then they have to become digitally literate. They have to have the computers in their hands. And then finally, because that is what we are about, is what will be the best use of the taxpayers' money. So the recommendation that we have for our pre-K students, we're looking at 5 student iPads in a classroom. For our K-1 students, we're looking at one iPad for every 2 students. We feel that the iPads will help our children become literate. It will get them used to the digital devices that they will need. And so we are not moving to laptops until 2nd grade, but we are moving to laptops in 2nd grade because the testing has to happen starting in 3rd grade, and we want our students to be ready for that. So what you have then, in 2nd through 6th grade, you have one laptop for every 2 students. This is important, again, if we want our students really to become digitally literate. This will allow 2 teachers to share their laptops and to have a complete set of laptops, or it will allow for a lot of cooperative learning, which we're doing now, so we can have 2 students on a laptop. And then you have the rest there, special education, our English language learners population, library speech, and then our teachers. As far as our software, I'm really going to let Karen Hawkins address the software if you have questions about that. The Discovery Education is an assessment that we use that is a benchmark assessment. Skyward is our data collection device. Skyward allows us to look at our students to see how they're doing academically, also socially and emotionally. It will track discipline. It tracks a lot of different things so that when that teacher pulls up that Skyward composite about the child, we know a lot about the child already. And then our online textbooks, extended learning tools, Sharp Tool, which is our website for our teachers, our SharePoint, which is our internet, and our school station. So the software will be accessible to our teachers. As far as our students, you have it there. Lexi is a reading program. You also have Type to Learn. Again, the importance of keyboarding for our students. If they're going to be taking tests online, if those tests are going to involve a lot of writing, then our children need to learn how to type. Rosetta Stone is our ELL software. It will help our English language learners to learn to speak English. This will be particularly useful in our upper grades. Usually our English language learners adapt pretty well in the lower grades, but when we have a 4th or a 5th grader that comes into our school system and they are not speaking English at all, we need to help them. Fast Math is an automaticity program. It really has to do with our children being able to add and subtract, multiply, and divide rapidly. As far as the infrastructure, when you look at the infrastructure, we are going to need to increase our network speed. It will allow for a single sign-on. We will have a management system there, and then our spam and virus filters. The total cost for this is $5,206,724, and that breaks down like this. As far as our students in pre-K through 6, and also our certified personnel, we're looking at a cost of $3,328,857. The infrastructure that we will need, $1,689,992, for a total of $5,018,849.60. But we also have a new school that will be coming online next year, and so that is why we have included funds and requested funds for those students and those teachers. So again, the total is a little over $5 million. As far as how this will work, we need this as rapidly as we can get it. Obviously, I've already said that we have a test that's coming up in February, but what will happen is as soon as hopefully you approve this, then we can start that transition. I'm going to ask if they would please, if Dan Shears, who's our technology person, and Gary Anderson, who's our finance person, and also Karen Hawkins, who's our curriculum person, if you would come up so that we can answer any questions that the council might have, I would appreciate it. And also maybe Chris, if you want to come up since you were part of this.
Mr. Gilley, you have a question.
Not a question, but to start with just some initial comments. Dr. Gilbert, you and your staff, your team do a phenomenal job, and I know you all never come to us for money unless it's absolutely necessary.
You're exactly correct.
But,
Thank you.
And as a parent of a child in the system, I can attest to what a fantastic job the system does. But, Mr. Lyons, you know the question, how are we going to pay for this?
Well, I think Mr. Crumley may have been working with Mr. Anderson a little more closely. We've really looked at a number of different options. Certainly when we look at investing in technology, this isn't something that's going to be a one-time expense. This will be an ongoing commitment. With the Common Core requirement that the testing be done online, that has forced all school systems to deal with upgrading their technology. Dr. Gilbert and her team have worked very closely. Mr. Lilly was certainly, I think, a good asset to them to try to analyze a number of different options about how to do this, provide the equipment that the children are going to need in the classroom, but also being fiscally responsible. So we've tried to look at it not just in terms of the one-time $5.2 million purchase, but you're going to have ongoing maintenance, staffing to assist the children when the computer crashes, as well as the replacement issue. And Mr. Crumley and Mr. Anderson have been kind of looking at a couple of different scenarios, and we really are, there's a couple different options here. I'd like Mr. Crumley now to speak to some of that.
And I don't, excuse me, I don't know that we're ready to make a firm recommendation to you tonight. We have identified several ways to pay for the computers over a long period of time, involving either current income, reprioritized in budgets, or using our accumulated reserves, or some combination of both. Knowing that these computers are replaced on about a 5-year cycle, we need to look at this as roughly an $800,000 expenditure every year to cover the potential debt service of purchasing computers on a 5-year cycle. We really don't have $800,000 left over from the operating budget that you all adopted for July 1st. We've got growth in income, but we've prioritized that income towards needs of our employees, replacing equipment, paying the expenses of running the city. We have this enormous opportunity, though, where the city's debt service, we're repaying debt at a very rapid rate. We will have over the next 3 budgets about a $5.5 million relief from the amount of principal and interest that we pay each year. However, tonight we're not ready to recommend to you that that's the source of paying for these computers. As you know, we have continually used fund balance to place the budget in equilibrium each year. We think we need to eliminate that as a priority for these windfall of debt service dollars. You all know that we've started on a classification and compensation study. There will likely be extraordinary new dollars required to fund getting people in the right positions in that class and compensation study. We identified this roll-off of debt as a potential for that. No different really than the computers. We tightened our belts and had to borrow money to pay for things that we replace every year, such as 25 police cars. We would like to get back to the point where we're again paying cash for those items that we know we buy many of each year and that they wear out in a relatively short period of time. So while there's an opportunity with this roll-off, we haven't sat down and prioritized that to where we're comfortable saying to you tonight, this is something you ought to consider for financing the computers. Likewise, we've looked at the fund balances of both the schools and the general fund. Your second goal was to maintain strong financial health and sustainability. And where our fund balances are currently in the general fund and the school fund, we are meeting that test. I think there is an opportunity, if you chose, to take from those reserves, both schools and the city general fund, to pay for the computers. But that's a one-time purchase. That really doesn't solve the question of how do you pay for them every 5 years in a repeated cycle. So there's probably a blend of alternatives where we would borrow money, try to work it into an operating budget, but in the worst case scenario still fall back into our reserves to pay an annual debt service bill and split that in some manner between the general fund and the schools. So I guess what I'm saying to you is we can pay for these computers. We'd like a couple more weeks to determine what the best method to go forward and pay for the computers are.
And we did have some conversation with Dr. Gilbert about the timing of this recommendation, and it was the February testing that is pushing getting the computers ordered, programmed, the software loaded on them, and into the classroom. We're confident we can find a way to pay for them, but we want to find the most effective way to do it. And one of the things Mr. Crumley mentioned was the use of fund balance. Each year your budget has included a fund balance appropriation, but the majority of those years we don't ever touch that fund balance. Fact of the matter is we grow our fund balance because we've watched our bottom line and perform very well financially. So we want to look at that combination and continue the conversation with schools about that combination of perhaps fund balance, and looking forward to what else we might be able to fund these with.
Mr. Lyons, is there a drop-dead date where?
I think by
you know
your
what the term I'm-
next meeting in September, we should be in a position to give you a formal recommendation. We're confident we can handle.
Now, what about, Ms. Gilbert, how long is it going to take to put this in place? When is your last go date?
I think
Dan.
Mr. Bashir, would you like? I think that Dan said that it was going to take about a month to get the infrastructure in place. Is that correct? But at the same time, while you're doing that, we could go ahead and be getting the computers in. Correct. Right. So I think that we're looking at doing both at the same time. Obviously, I would like to have had 2 years if the state had made their mind up 2 years ago to have our children prep for this. But I think what's most important is this. The timeline is critical, absolutely, I understand that. But it's even more critical. I want to look at this as not just because of testing, but I want to look at this because of student learning. So right now, our teachers are going to use these computers immediately when we can get them. So I think we're really, I would have liked to have had them yesterday, but I'll take them when I can get them. Because I understand what you're saying as far as your fiscal responsibility, and I feel that too. Otherwise, we wouldn't have cut our budgets like we have the last few years. So I understand your need to do due diligence to find, and for Mr. Crumley to have a chance to really look at this and see how it's best.
So if we wait 8 to 10 days and get all the research in and everything that's done, that is still, you could be up and running in 30, 40 days after that decision was made.
Go ahead, Dan.
Yes, sir.
Don't you hate people that ask questions like that?
Well, I mean, you got to build the infrastructure. It's kind of like building a house. We got to start from the bottom up. And to build that, it's going to take a few days. I mean, it's not anything that we're going to be able to do overnight. So we're looking at 30 days to do that. While we're doing that, we'll be getting the computers ready. As Mr. Lyons was saying, we'll get the software loaded on them. We've got to get them set up to be ready to go into the classroom so they'll be a useful tool once they get there.
30 days is scary considering it takes 10 years to build a road.
Yes, sir. And there again, it may take a little longer than that, maybe 30 to 45 before we're actually
I can be
complete.
very encouraging. No, we have excellent folks, and I'm grateful for our technology department because they understand the priority, and that makes a big difference. And they are absolutely committed to doing what we need to do for the children, and that helps when you're talking about trying to roll something out.
Mr. Gilley?
Just dovetailing with what Mr. Young was saying, so the time frame that Mr. Lyons and Mr. Crumley are proposing to get back to us with a recommendation, it's a date within which you all can make work with the time frame that you're working on.
And what I may need to do would be to go back to the board, but I think that we could arrange that.
Okay.
I think that there's such a commitment to this on the part of everyone involved that we will do what we need to do with the time frames we're given and be grateful for it.
Well, and again, you've got good staff, and I know firsthand what a good job Dan does. Matter of fact, his wife, I believe, was my little girl's second grade teacher.
Probably.
And
So, undue influence.
nah.
Dr. Gilbert, I know we have a excellent, outstanding school system. This requirement for computers goes to Granger County, goes to Pickett County, goes to Carroll County.
That's right. We started looking at this. It does, and it's a real issue, and that's why I have to approach this. It's not just about testing, but it is about if we really want to prepare children, then we can't have 3 computers in a classroom that were purchased in 2007 or before. And so if we're committed to that whole child, and if we're committed to our children being able to look at and be part of the workforce, that isn't going to start when they hit 7th grade. That has to start early. And so, in my mind, I understand the test is out there, but I know more importantly the children are out there. And so I think that we need this for our children. If we're going to be progressive, I think it's critical.
Can we sell these 2007 model computers that we've got?
When's our next regular scheduled meeting with the holiday coming up?
September 12th would likely be your next meeting.
All right. Any other questions regarding this technology request? Mr. Smotherman.
I don't know that it's a question. I'm going to make a comment. And I guess 5 or 6 days ago, I didn't know that I needed $5.26 million, and today I do. It seems like every 4 to 6 years, or maybe 8 years, Washington comes up with this idea of no child left behind, or we're going to race to the top. And now all of a sudden it's Common Core.
That's right.
I just don't know how in the world they can mandate local governments to implement something that they absolutely mandate and say we have to do, but give us no funding for it. And I know the state took some money in order to buy into the Common Core program. Is there any accessibility at all for the city to go after the state and say we want some of that money to help offset these costs?
No, the Race to the Top was a 4-year program that actually ends this year. Initially, and here was the confusing part, initially, the first year I asked, can we use some of this for technology? I was told no. Since that time, it seems that some of that has flexed, but until, and Chris, I guess this year, we found out really what we were going to need as far as the testing. That's why, Mr. Smotherman, I have to, when the state comes down with something like that, what I try to do is say, all right, here's the way we're going to implement this, but we're going to look at it as something that's going to be useful for our children. Common Core is really a good thing. When you look at it, it is a set of standards. It's not a curriculum. It doesn't tell teachers how to teach. But it really is a common sense approach to instruction, very much like the way that I was taught. You're younger, so you probably had some of the different, but it really has to do with children being able to solve problems. It has to do with children being able to look at 2 different pieces of literature and compare them. That's why the technology is so important. Yes, the technology is pushed because of the testing that has to happen. But again, what I've tried to do over the last few months is to set that aside in my mind and really look at how can we best use this technology for student learning. What happens on the test will happen on the test. But what those students will learn as far as what they need for every day is a very different thing in many ways. And so I want them ready to be able to be a city councilman with a laptop in front of them and to be able to look at that and figure out what they're going to do with that. I want them to be that engineer that uses that laptop to design buildings. But I know I have to start them early. And right now we just don't have that accessibility to technology that we need.
And I agree with you 1,000%, Dr. Gilbert. And the emphasis really is here on trying to better educate our children. And we're fully in agreement on that. My only concern is the fact that it seems like Washington continually puts mandates on us that are, because we're in pretty darn good financial situation, I think, as our city is run, I think we will be probably successful in pulling this off. I don't see how in the world a Cannon County or a Grundy County or
many of them have totally depleted their fund balance. And the cost is not just the technology. We had teachers, every grade level in every school went for 3 days of training this summer. They paid for that gas on their own to go there. There were people, we went to Franklin for the training. There were people that went across state for the training. So you're absolutely right. We're in much better shape. Have we spent a lot of money because of the initiatives from Race to the Top? Absolutely. And there are unfunded mandates coming down all the time. We're very fortunate. You're exactly right. We're very fortunate to live in a city where our school system is already almost there, so that when this comes down, we absorb it. But when I have our teachers go and they go to the training and they come back to me and they say, I never realized how fortunate we are to live here. Or when I have a supervisor that goes and says, Linda, what we've been doing is exactly what the state says we're supposed to be doing, but I want you to know that there were supervisors crying in the hallway because they don't have a clue how they're going to push this down to their teachers. You're exactly right. And that's my soapbox, sort of, but I do think that people need to take best practice and use it instead of planning something and then having to back up or try to figure out how in the world they're going to implement it. So I absolutely agree with your statements.
Thank you.
All right. You have this technology request. We will consider adopting a resolution if you approve the request, and that resolution would expressed an official intent that we might want to borrow the funds, at least for a portion of that expenditure, if we decide to do that at a later date. But you have this request before you.
When the resolution is written, as a refunding resolution, that in January, when we are going to need to have our next borrowing, that we would borrow the full amount. A subsequent recommendation that we would bring back to you isn't going to increase the amount we would borrow. It might lessen the amount we would borrow because we would have taken it from city or school fund balances. So this would kind of be the high level that we would potentially look at. Recommendation we might bring to you would use fund balance potentially to lower that amount, just for clarification.
All right, thank you. You have this request. Are there any other questions or comments?
So the appropriate protocol is to go ahead and approve this resolution if that's their intent, and then wait for you to come back with the formalized recommendation as to the...
Yes, sir. That would allow the city school system to begin, ordering the computers, incurring the expense, and then we'll come back to you where we, worst case
Figure out
scenario
how
is
to
we
pay
would borrow
for
the
it.
whole thing. We think we may be able to do a little bit better.
I'll move that we accept the resolution as presented.
Second.
All right, this is for the technology request, and then do we have to do on both? Or just the resolution? So only on the resolution.
Right, that would be all you would need to.
All right, Mr. Smotherman moves the resolution. Is there a second?
You had three.
So we had three.
Whatever you want.
All right, Vice Mayor, we'll give you the honor. How about that?
Well, I heard a lot more of this than you have tonight.
He is
All
our
right,
school board
since you've had to sit through more of it than we have. Ms. Wright, please call the roll.
Mr. Gilly.
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Washington.
Aye.
Mr. Young.
Aye.
Mayor Bragg.
Aye. Thank you all for being here. We appreciate your work and for taking care of our children. And I know Mr. Gilly is personally going to benefit from this because his child will be a brilliant child. So good luck to you keeping up with your child.
That's right.
Thank you all for being here. Ms. Wright, what about our beer permit applications?
Mayor, we have a change of ownership tonight for a convenience store at 225 North Rutherford Boulevard, Suite H. We have the background check back, and it has met our conditions, but we are still waiting for them to pass their building codes inspection, so I request permission to issue the permit when that's completed.
All right, subject to building and codes, is there a motion we accept?
So moved. Second.
Thank you, Mr. Gilly. Mr. Young, please call the roll.
Mr. Gilly.
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Washington.
Aye.
Mr. Young.
Aye.
Mayor Bragg.
Aye. You have the list of statements to be considered for payment.
Mayor, I move we pay the bills.
Thank you, Mr. Young. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Smotherman, thank you. Please call the roll regarding paying the bills.
Mr. Gilly.
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Washington.
Aye.
Mr. Young.
Aye.
Mayor Bragg.
Aye.
Mayor,
Yes?
Mayor, before you go on, I had accidentally put it in my folder and skipped over. I have a request from the chamber to change an event.
Correct.
They had a special event for business after hours to happen on November 12th, and the location has had to be changed because of the person who originally had agreed had to step back. So I'm requested permission to switch the location from 1639 Medical Center Parkway to 1720 Old Fort Parkway. All the other information on the application is the same.
Is there a motion?
Motion.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Smotherman. Mr. Gilly, please call the roll.
Mr. Gilly.
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Washington.
Aye.
Mr. Young.
Aye.
Mayor Bragg.
Aye. No board and commission appointments. Other business to come before the council?
I want to make.
Mr. Crumley, just a minute. Vice Mayor has a comment.
Oh, well, no, he can go ahead.
Representing Mr. Callow tonight. Two bids were opened on Tuesday afternoon for rehabilitation at a home at 1111 Sherwood Lane. The first bid was a major rehabilitation of the home. There were two bidders. We're recommending the low bid of James I. Brown at $78,700. The second part of that was the removal of asbestos from the dwelling. There was only one bid for that project. It came in several $100s below what the estimate was. That's to A&A Contractors Incorporated for $2,650. Both of these amounts are presently covered in the Community Development Fund and in the current year's budget.
All right. Any questions regarding this request? If not, is there a motion to accept?
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Gilly? Mr. Young, please call the roll.
Mr. Gilly.
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Washington.
Aye.
Mr. Young.
Aye.
Mayor Bragg.
Aye. Now, Vice
Okay,
Mayor.
thank you. Councilman Smotherman and I we had a good time this morning, I believe, at the business before hours that the chamber has. I didn't see any others out there, but it was very interesting. But it was also the kickoff for the United Way campaign. So those of you in the public out there that contribute to the United Way, and those of you that don't, get your pocketbooks open. United Way does some wonderful things, and I tell the employees at Northern Electric that you'd be surprised how many of their nieces, nephews, grandparents, or whatever have needed services from the United Way, and I want the public to think the same way. They do a valuable opportunity. But the next one, they're going to have the business before hours. It's going to be the 26th of September at my corporate office at North Tennessee Electric on 555 New Salem Highway. Looking to see some of you there. And I hope their goal is $3.6 million. So that's, but they've met it every time, I believe. They may have missed it some, but with the recession, who knows? But they do a wonderful job and touch a lot of folks, and I just wanted to make that announcement. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Anything else? Happy birthday again, Mr. Lyons. Oakland Riverdale kickoff tonight for high school football.
Should be over by now.
We could have a score, but I don't see it. So you are adjourned.